Here's a stat that may surprise you. Only 12% of youth in Greater Rochester and the Finger Lakes are getting daily physical activity. I'm talking 60 minutes a day of active time. That's one of the stats released in a recent report by the Aspen Institute. The findings are being used by the Wilson Foundation and the Rochester Area Community Foundation to improve access to sports, among other things, for area kids. So why is this important? And why do you need to know about it? Joining me in the studio to explain is Hank Rubin, Vice President of Community Programs for the Rochester Area Community Foundation. Chad C.J. Thomas, a youth athlete and freshman at East High School. Iris Zimmerman, a former Olympian and co-owner of Rochester Fencing Club. And Tony Jordan, President of Rochester Youth Sports Foundation. Welcome to all of you. I appreciate it. So I want to start with why. Why are so few kids in our region getting the physical activity that they need, the activity recommended by obesity experts, recommended by the CDC? Why is this happening? And I'll give this to you first, Hank.
Well, I'll start with what the report showed and what even this morning's Democrat and Chronicle showed. The huge distraction of technology for kids who would much rather be sitting in front of the technology instead of running around outside. The absence of parental engagement on the sports activities. 81% of all the parents that were interviewed on this said that they would like to see their kids more engaged in recreational and sports activities. But as you said, only 12 or 13% of the kids actually do it on a daily basis. The Aspen report, which I'm sure we're going to talk about, found such things as the absence of facilities and resources that are within walking range, within short driving range, the absence of transportation resources to get to some of these, and the absence of coaches and the absence of more. So it's really a concerted opportunity for a lot of us in the community to start thinking about how to put our heads together to not just create resources and opportunities for recreation and sports for kids, but to sort of elevate that as a priority, as something that's cool and fun and needs to happen among kids.
Well, this was an extensive report. 40 findings that incorporated the viewpoints of more than 1,000 adults and young people in the region, in addition to a task force of more than 3,000 people, 3 dozen people. The thing that I liked about it, incorporating young people such as you, CJ, and you were featured in the State of Play report. Yes. You are what we would call, right, a triple threat. Yes. You are involved in football, basketball, and baseball. You are also an honor student. And I want to know, tell me about some of the challenges that you encountered, your family encountered, when you wanted to get involved in organized sports in your neighborhood.
We were searching for a good program that had good coaches and everybody wasn't fighting for the same position. That was pretty much hard to find for baseball, especially because I tried T-ball in the city, but we never even had a game. I mean, it was just so unorganized in the city. Football, kids fighting for the same positions, coaches yelling at me. I wanted to quit football at one point, but I got back into it once I went to the suburbs because everybody's not trying to get the same position. The coaches are nicer, everybody's hardworking, and again, that's just.
So the solution that your family found was to go to the suburbs to get involved in those different leagues.
Yes.
So I want to follow up on that because, and you mentioned this too, Hank, accessibility and accessibility and all that word entails, right? Based on some of the findings in this report. Iris and Tony, what would you point to in terms of the accessibility issues? What are they? But what are some opportunities that we have available to kind of fill that gap?
We don't have enough time. I think Tony can speak to a lot of it, but you know, I'm a for-profit business owning the Rochester Fencing Club, and I've started a non-profit arm of it, trying to get into the city. And it's not just accessibility. I've even offered getting a grant from the Greater Rochester Health Foundation, going to a city school and saying, hey, we'll offer fencing for free. I don't know who to talk to. No one gets back to me. It's not just accessibility, but it's also there are communication gaps and barriers of who to talk to, who's the point person. And so you really, if you're going to do that, you do what Tony does, is you dedicate everything to that nonprofit because you have to be on top of it the whole time.
Yeah, and I agree. I think one of the big things is the education that our community has around the value of sports, so that people understand that it's not just a recreational type thing. It's not just for someone who is very talented. Sports is for everyone, play is for everyone, and it's a matter of life and death to a certain extent when you're talking about obesity and you're talking about social and emotional health of our youth, because we found that kids who play do something after school, have better academic outcomes, have better health outcomes. So I think we have to re-educate our community, and then the communication barrier is huge. You know, getting people together, like-minded, that can connect the parents, the children, and the coaches in these organizations. So we do have a lot of things that we have the opportunity to work on now.
I just wanted to add that there was a twofold problem. One is the parents aren't active. I mean, how many of us don't want to, we talked about not eating our vegetables. The parents aren't going to the gym or being active. So the kids are role modeling from the parents. The second thing is, and I want to just say that again, is that sports is seen as a stepchild. Like, everyone wants to pump money into STEM. Everyone thinks that it's all about science. But you can't have that. People are active people, and we learn better if we're active.
The research in terms of brain development and for young people getting involved in sports, I mean, it is immense. And I want to talk about that because of our stakeholders who are watching, right? The stakeholders in this community, and also the viewers tuning in who may say, well, my kids are involved in sports, like we're fine. And I want to speak to those people in particular because there are benefits for those in Greater Rochester and the Finger Lakes in increasing the number of young people who are actively involved, increasing access, ensuring that they get more physical activity. Hank, talk about some of the benefits and talk about some of the recommendations in this report to kind of help facilitate kind of revitalizing youth activities. The first recommendation is that, as both Tony and Iris said here, making sure that we elevate this as a priority, making this part of a larger conversation, engaging people who would not ordinarily even be part of this conversation in realizing the significance of healthy recreational options for kids, encouragement of engagement in those healthy recreational and sports options, that those are not discretionary in terms of we don't need those as much as we need good education, we don't need those as much as we need good health. These are things that contribute to the access and the capacity of kids to grow up and do good education, participate and receive good education. They help us ensure that kids are going to grow up healthy. They reduce our health costs. They increase the impact of our educational opportunities. And so it's sports and recreations as resources and supports for so much more that we're trying to work on in Rochester to help ensure that the kids in the Rochester and Finger Lakes region grow up healthy, promoted for full access to all the resources they want to be able to access, well-educated, healthy, and so forth. You know, there's a wonderful, this is the report. Yeah. And we'll have a link to that for our viewers too.
Very good, because we're happy to distribute this to as many people, and it's available online. There's a wonderful set in the back of the report of what they call, instead of recommendations, they call them ideas. And they have everything to do with engaging civic leaders more effectively, building coalitions across youth resources, building transportation resources that don't yet exist, trainings for coaches.
And I'm going to jump in here with you because I want to ask you, CJ, something that I appreciated about this report was they said far too often we hear from the adults who are organizing youth sports, and we don't hear from the young people who are involved in them in terms of what they want to see. So we've got this list of ideas. What do you want to see happen, or what are you hoping will happen when it comes to youth sports for your siblings, for your classmates, so that they have that access and more availability to them?
I just want everybody, I want them to know that if they try to use sport, they will be happy and that they will succeed in whatever they're doing. So I don't want everybody just going there just trying to do something that they really don't want to do. I want them to be happy and like succeed out of what they really want to do. How
do you think it's benefited you being involved in the three sports?
I think it's benefited me a lot because I've known a lot of kids who just go to the rec center and play basketball. They have the talent, but then they get caught up in the streets because they're too lazy to do it and they're not being pushed by their parents to do anything. They just want to sit on the streets and do things that are illegal and things.
You know, Helene, it's interesting. That report was written by somebody who's also a journalist like you. And one of the recommendations or ideas in here includes just what you just did, that we need, if we're going to be really effective at this, we need not to presume that those of us who are, let me say, over 30 in this room, have the answers to what the kids want and need and will participate in enthusiastically in terms of rec and sports. We have to go to the kids and learn from them what's going to light their fires and engage them in these activities.
We've got less than a minute. I just want to say how I'm interested. Less than a minute, sorry. How has the community responded? How, so far, this report was released in June. What's happening? What are we hearing?
I think for us who are out there in that youth sports space, we're very, very excited to see what things are coming up.
Yeah, and I think what it's doing is it's putting it on the forefront. So this has given us the opportunity to continue the conversation with folks, like Hank said, that don't typically pay attention to sports or take it serious as a part of the healthy opportunities for youth to grow up and be productive citizens. So this has given us a chance to get their attention, get parents' attention, and then work with young people to see what their interests are.
And
Well, we have to close. I'm so sorry, Hank. We got to close, but a special thank you to all of you for being here. Obviously, lots more that we can discuss, but do be sure to check out the report. It is available online for you by the Aspen Institute. Great practical suggestions that can be used. Go to RACF/reports to download State of Play.